us a little bit about today's meeting.
Today's meeting really was the court's opportunity to ask, now that there is a finding that the program is unconstitutional in terms of how it's applied, to find remedies for those elements that are found to be not constitutional. So the request from the court was to begin a dialogue about that, and then what of those remedies are the priority, because the court understands that its implementation has to be integrated, but maybe also phased in terms of what we're able to afford.
And again, you did carry legislation a few years ago that did pass the Senate, but not the full legislature. What are some of the ideas that were in that proposal that you believe might be enacted moving forward?
Well, a priority that I heard from the group today that was in the legislation was the development of less restrictive alternatives that have highly secure activities within them that allow people to have an alternative to being treated behind a barbed wire. These are people, remember, that have already done their time for their crimes, so they're moving into the mental health system. And we would like to have less restrictive alternatives with high secure supervision afforded to a court, so that when somebody comes out of corrections but are going to be civilly committed, might be civilly committed to something less restrictive than Moose Lake or St. Peter. And then also less restrictive alternatives for persons who are moving through the civil commitment program and are reintegrating into the community. That is in my bill that was passed in the Senate, and it was clear today that people believe that's foundational to really having significant reform in the system.
How do you try to gain public confidence in your idea? There isn't a lot of confidence that outside of a very secure facility that somebody won't reoffend.
Well, it will take time. I think getting the message out that counteracts false information that's out there about the level of risk, especially for some populations that are disabled, juveniles that are there, 60 juveniles that are there, some of which have never committed a crime, or the elderly, that when we're talking about being able to move people forward, there are many that have very low risk of recidivism. We need a public information campaign that reminds the public that there are people coming out of corrections already that are not being civilly committed, that are being placed in the community having committed sexual crimes. And this public information needs to help people understand that it is not the people that we have identified and who we can supervise that are the risk. It's those that are in our community that we don't know about, that still have not been discovered as criminal sex offenders and have not yet been charged. So what we're dealing with is a population that has been identified, that we know about, and that we can surround with very secure services.
Finally, Senator, as this process moves forward, let's say hypothetically that it's not done with if there is an appeal, that this process is not complete by the time the next legislative session meets. Is this something you would move forward with again in 2016, legislation in the Senate, even if this process is ongoing?
Well, I'm initiating these reforms not because of the court case or the constitutionality questions, although that really puts an impetus behind the legislature. It's because many task forces have recommended these kinds of reforms and improvements, not only to the way in which people get into civil commitment or move out of the program, but the program itself in terms of the people there being able to have their treatment plans be appropriate in order to help the people who are in the civil commitment program have a review regularly as to whether or not they continue to meet civil commitment. So those remedies that we have passed in the Senate are reforms, and they do align with what the court believes needs to be done to make it constitutional. Now, to the question of whether or not I'll introduce it again, it's already introduced. I have introduced a piece of legislation that has broad reforms that align with what the court wants, plus a change in our sentencing structure for future sex offenders. And whether or not we will be able to get the House to pick it up and have hearings on it is something beyond the sphere of my control. I do think there are things that can be done administratively, so then the question is whether or not we'll be able to put money in our bonding bill or in our general appropriations that will help the administration to carry out things that they could already do administratively without legislative action.
Senator Kathy Sheran, as always, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.